Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Finding International Customers in a Virtual World, Exporting in the New Normal, presented by the Florida SBDC at UCF. My name is Christopher Bogstad, and I'm an Associate Consultant at the Florida SBDC, and I'll be hosting the webinar today along with our presenters, Jill McLaughlin, Ken Mouradian, and Mike Cooney. Before we get started, I'd like to give a brief overview of the SBDC. The SBDC, or Small Business Development Center at UCF, is an economic development organization that exists to help small businesses grow and succeed, and we serve an 8-county region. We are state designated as Florida's principal provider of business assistance and are partially funded by the US SBA, State of Florida, and other local support organizations and community partners. The SBDC has been around for 45 years, and we have offices throughout Florida, ranging from our headquarters in Pensacola all the way to the Keys, with each region being hosted by a university or state college. In Central Florida, we are hosted by UCF. Our service offerings include no-cost, one-on-one consulting in all different areas of business, and normally in-person, but now virtual seminars on various business topics and strategies. We would also like to thank TD Bank for kindly sponsoring this webinar. Before we get started, I just wanted to cover a few housekeeping rules. Your mics are muted by default, but if you have any questions, please feel free to use the questions chat box feature in the GoToWebinar panel at any time, and we'll address them towards the end of the presentation. And please don't use the raise hand feature. Again, just use the questions box. Copies of today's presentation can be found under the Handouts tab on the GoToWebinar panel. Evaluation surveys for this webinar will be emailed to you shortly after this session. So please check your inbox at the conclusion and submit your feedback as soon as we can so we can improve our future offerings. Now, before I pass it over to Jill, I would like to give a brief introduction of today's presenters. Jill McLaughlin serves as the program manager for the Florida SBDC at University of Central Florida's Export Marketing Plan Service, advising companies on overseas growth strategies. She began her career as a certified public accountant with PricewaterhouseCoopers in Detroit, Michigan. Later, Ms. McLaughlin rose to vice president with Morgan Stanley in their investment banking division in New York and Chicago, where she advised global 1,000 companies on the strategic and financial impact of acquisitions, divestitures, capital restructuring, debt financing, equity issuances, and initial public offerings. While at Morgan Stanley, Ms. McLaughlin facilitated numerous companies' entries into Europe, Asia, and South America by helping them develop international expansion strategies and raise required capital in the public markets. Since 2002, Ms. McLaughlin has been the small business consultant advising growing businesses on financial management, strategic growth plans, and international trade. She is a certified global business professional. Ms. McLaughlin holds a master's degree in business administration from the University of Chicago with a concentration in finance and business economics, and a bachelor's degree in business administration from the University of Michigan with a concentration in accounting. Next, we have Ken Mouradian. Ken is the director of Orlando U.S. Export Assistance Center, a field of the U.S. Department of Commerce, International Trade Administration. As the director of Orlando U.S. Export Assistance Center, Kenneth R. Mouradian is responsible to facilitate the export of U.S. origin commodities, services, and technologies from 11 counties in Central Florida. He is also the executive secretary of the Central North Florida District Export Council. Mr. Mouradian came to Orlando in 2002 as a Foreign Service Officer, a U.S. diplomat on a 2-year tour of duty. His previous assignments were as Second Secretary for Commercial Affairs at the U.S. Mission to the European Union, where he was responsible for the biotechnology, pharmaceutical medicines, customs, and taxation portfolios, and Management Program Analyst in the Career Development and Assignments, where he worked on special projects such as the development and administration of specialized versions of the Foreign Service exam for the recruitment of foreign service officers into the commercial service. Mr. Mouradian possesses a Master's of Arts in European Studies from the Elliott School of International Affairs, the George Washington University, and a Bachelor of Arts in International Affairs from the George Washington University. Mr. Mouradian reads, writes, and speaks French fluently. Finally, Mike Cooney. Mike is the Director of International Trade and Development at Enterprise Florida, the statewide economic development organization. He works in the Orlando office and covers a 10-county region where he assists all companies interested in exporting their products and services globally. In addition, he is responsible for the aviation, aerospace, and defense sectors statewide. Mike organizes, manages, and recruits companies to exhibit the Florida Pavilion at Farnborough, Paris, Singapore, and Dubai air shows. Mike also supports Florida aviation-related companies attending MRO Europe and other MRO shows around the world. Mike has been involved in international and economic developments his entire career. He has traveled to more than 50 countries and is a published travel author. He lives in Orlando with his wife, Catrell. They have 3 grown sons, Morgan, Zach, and Harrison. Now I will turn it over to Jill.
Thank you, Christopher, for those introductions. And actually, before we get started, I believe we had a couple of questions to pose to everybody. Christopher, would you be able to put that on the screen?
Yes, absolutely. So the first poll question that we have is, according to the World Bank, in which country is it easiest to do business? Our answer alternatives is the USA, Switzerland, Canada, or New Zealand. Go ahead and give your answer, and I will keep it up for a couple of more seconds before I close. Okay, I will go ahead and close it now. So quite a few people answered the USA with 62%, Switzerland with 10%, Canada with 14%, and New Zealand with 14%. The right answer is New Zealand.
That is right. So the World Bank does a study every year measuring the ease of doing business. They do it on a number of different factors, including ease of starting a business, the regulatory environment, enforcing contracts. So yes, in fact, New Zealand is #1. And just as a point of reference, the United States is #6. So great question. Christopher, I think we have one more.
Yes, we have one more question. So this question is, what is the national animal of Scotland? And the answer alternatives are deer, moose, unicorn, or fox. We'll have this open for a few seconds. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close it now. And we had 23 people answer deer, 14% moose, 27% unicorn, and 36% fox. And the right answer, surprisingly, is unicorn.
That is right. And so interesting history here. The unicorn was adopted as Scotland's national animal by King Robert in the late 1300s. And they did so because it's a symbol of purity, innocence, and power in Celtic mythology. So for hundreds of years, the Scottish royal coat of arms featured 2 unicorns protecting the shield. And when England and Scotland united in 1707, one of the unicorns was replaced with the lion. So if you were to look at the United Kingdom's coat of arms today, you'll see that it features a lion on the left side of the shield and a unicorn on the right side. So fun fact. So thank you for that, Christopher. And we're going to get started with the presentation. So thank you all for joining us for our webinar today. We're glad to have you, and happy World Trade Month. May is designated as World Trade Month, so we're glad that we're able to present this webinar today on finding international customers in a virtual world. So the goals that we want to go through today is first talk about a company's export strategy to grow your business and steps for successful selling, and discuss the different market entry strategies that you can utilize to enter different markets overseas. We'll talk about opportunities to identify and vet potential customers in international markets. and best practices for exhibiting at trade shows, both virtual and in person. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about the resources that are available to all of you to support your international expansion efforts. But before we get into all that, I always like to start with, why should you consider exporting as a strategy for your business? Well, some of the reasons include over 95% of the world's customers are located beyond US borders. Companies that export are known to be more profitable, grow faster, create more jobs. And the diversification offered by exporting enables a company to ride out the fluctuations in the US economy, as well as seasonality of your business, so making you more a stable, stronger business. Each year, US companies export over $2 trillion of goods. So your competitors are increasing market share. Why aren't you? The United States is known for its high quality, made in the USA products and services are in great demand. So it's a great strategy for growth. I wanted to share just some statistics on exporting from Florida. You'll see on this slide here the top 10 markets for Florida origin exports. Because of Florida's strategic geographic location, we account for 29% of the total US trade with Latin America and the Caribbean. So we're a major gateway for merchandise trade to these markets. However, we're also a significant exporter to other markets, such as Canada, you can see here, and the United Kingdom. So again, just to highlight the advantages of exporting, first and foremost is just a huge opportunity to grow your business, expand your sales worldwide, expand your profitability, improve your competitiveness, reduce your dependence on the US market, and make you a stronger company going forward. So I've convinced you on the merits for exporting. Now the question is my company ready to start exporting? So when I talk to companies to determine their readiness, these are some of the questions that we ask and talk about to determine their readiness to export successfully. So first is, do you have a product or service that has been successful in the domestic market? This can be a good proxy for demand and potential export success. However, I will say that management commitment is really the #1 determining factor for export success. Exporting does take a commitment of staff, money, and resources to expand this new market. Just like if you were expanding into a new domestic market, it would take also a dedication of your resources. But international markets, which could even be half a world away, will take even more time and more commitment. So we need to make sure that the whole management team is committed to this new strategy, sees the value of it to your business, some of the values we talked about just a minute ago, and also have a realistic expectation on the return on your investment. I'll tell you that an international strategy is a long-term strategy. Although internet sales can happen quickly, finding a distributor or other means to sell your product abroad can take time. So again, just want to make sure the whole team is committed to that process. A financial commitment will also be required for activities such as marketing. You may need to adapt your product. Hopefully one day we will all be traveling more again, as well as working capital needs to expand your business. Fortunately, there are a number of export finance resources available to Florida small businesses, and I'm going to mention some of those later in this presentation. Also, do you have sufficient production capacity? Once you've committed your time and resources to developing this market, and you get that first purchase order, you want to make sure that you have the ability to fulfill that on a timely basis. So again, it's not a short-term strategy. but it is a potentially very lucrative long-term one that is supported by a well thought out plan. On this slide here, I just wanted to highlight some of the steps for successful selling overseas. Now, unfortunately, we don't have time to go into each and every one of these steps today, but we are going to cover several of them. And, I just wanted to talk next about market research to assist you in identifying which market you should pursue, offering your company the greatest opportunity and return on investment. I find that, unfortunately, many companies begin exporting haphazardly without careful examination and screening of markets, as well as looking at the different options for market entry. And therefore, they may be overlooking better export opportunities. So again, I can't stress enough the importance of really putting together a well thought out export strategy and plan. And you're going to learn that the resources that you have here today to help you do that. So again, market research is really the foundation for determining which target markets you should be pursuing for new customers, as well as the market entry strategy that is best for your business. Through doing market research, you will be able to identify which target markets offer your company the best opportunity by looking at which markets are the largest, the fastest growing. The market research will identify trends, outlook, market conditions, government regulations, as well as what is your competition in competing products around the world. So how do you do this market research? Well, on the internet, there are a number of databases that are free and available to you that has a lot of great information to support your market research. Also, the International Trade Administration through export.gov has a market research library with a number of wonderful resources, including country commercial guides, which talk about how to do business in countries around the world. And then the Florida SBDC, as Christopher mentioned earlier, we provide no-cost one-on-one consulting services. One of those services is market research. We are very fortunate that we have subscription to databases that can provide you with a plethora of international market research. These market research databases subscriptions to them are often too expensive for small businesses. So I'm very proud to say that we offer market research capabilities of a Fortune 500 company to small businesses. And again, those market research services provided by the SBDC are at no cost to small businesses here in Florida. Another resource is industry associations. So any industry association that you belong to also often has a lot of market research that can support your analysis on opportunities in international markets. So you've done your market research and you've identified the target markets for your product and service that you believe offers your company the greatest opportunity for growth. So now the question is, what is the best market entry strategy that you should pursue? And I would say that when you're thinking about what market entry strategy to pursue, there are a number of things to consider. First is, what financial and internal resources are you willing to commit to this export process? The type of product that's being serviced or that's being exported can dictate which market entry strategy makes sense for that market. Business conditions of the target market, which may dictate the best market entry strategy. Government regulations. Some markets may require or strongly encourage you to use a local agent, for example, in order to do business. Or some may require or strongly encourage a joint venture type arrangement in order to do business in that country. But understanding the economic, political, cultural, and specific business conditions in the market will help dictate which strategy makes sense to you. And then lastly, risk tolerance. With each market entry strategy, there may be a different level of risk. So we'll go through some of that, but as is often the case, risk and return is a trade-off. So on this page, I've listed here some different methodologies for entering market, indirect and direct. And the primary consideration in determining whether to market indirectly or directly is the level of resources your company is willing to dedicate to this process. It's also based on your level of risk, the nature of your product or service, as we talked about before, as well as the amount of control that you're willing to relinquish in dealing with customers and users of your goods. So first, to talk about some indirect selling methodologies. So as listed here, in indirect selling through intermediaries, you are turning over the export activities to a third party. So these intermediaries may assume responsibilities for finding your buyers overseas. They can take care of shipping, may take care of payment mechanisms. However, they also may be working with a variety of other companies too. So their focus may not be exclusively on your product. There are also online marketplaces that you can utilize, such as Amazon, eBay, and Alibaba, which of course have exploded since the pandemic. Lastly, want to mention in the indirect selling is piggyback marketing. So what piggyback marketing is whereby you have a company that is currently exporting already, but your product is complementary and sold to the same customers that they are selling to. So this piggyback marketing company becomes your export department. So these indirect selling methods may require fewer resources than direct. They may be faster to market and lower risk. But the trade-off is that you do lose control over the marketing of your product. You may get little feedback from your customers because you're not directly interacting with your customers. And sometimes you may not even get the names of who these customers are. And therefore, because some of these intermediaries are also maybe working for other companies, you may not be maximizing your sales potential. And then because they are intermediaries, you will be giving up some of the profit margin as well. So let's talk about some of the direct selling methods. So the direct selling methods may lead you to more profits and longer term growth. They can be more lucrative. You have more control over the process. You will have a closer relationship to your international buyers. And having that relationship will enable you to learn more about your competitiveness and maximize your international potential. You can sell directly through distributors, agents, representatives. When companies use distributors, they often establish distributor agreements for specific markets with defined borders. And these distributors can take title of the goods and support your sales and marketing efforts. So it is a method that's often utilized. You can also sell directly to, example, a foreign retailer. So it might be the Walmart of that nation, or directly to the end user through your website. We do recommend that you develop a global web presence with your website so international customers can find you. They may buy from you directly, or enabling these foreign buyers to do their due diligence and learn more about your product or service. So really important, and you'll hear about some services to help support that effort later in this presentation. So again, these are just summarizing some of the foreign market entry strategies that you can utilize. And I'm very pleased that we have the U.S. Commercial Service and Enterprise Florida with tremendous resources to help Florida exporters identify what is the best market entry strategy for you to utilize for given target markets, as well as they have a number of services to assist you in identifying and vetting potential business partners. So I am now going to turn it over to Ken and Mike, who are going to talk about some of these services that are available to Florida businesses and how some of these services have adapted in the virtual environment that we've all been in since the pandemic started. So starting us out, I am going to turn it over to Ken.
Great, thanks, Jill. And thank you, Chris, and thank you, SBDC, for letting me speak today. I was actually surprised we went through my full bio, but so now you know who I am. We can flip forward from this slide to the next one. I am director of a field office of the U.S. Commercial Service. That is a business unit within the International Trade Administration, which is one of the 11 bureaus of the U.S. Department of Commerce. The U.S. Commercial Service, effectively the agency that I work for, is the commercial section of U.S. embassies, which is to say that we're everywhere that you're looking to do business, generally speaking. We really only do three things: export promotion, commercial diplomacy, and business attraction, which I'll describe in the next slide. To qualify for our services, generally speaking, the company has to be organized under the laws of the United States. If you are interested in the partner identification and qualification services that will be the focus of this presentation, your product also has to meet a U.S. source standard, which is to say that 51% of the ex-factory price has to come from U.S. sources if it's a good, and if it's a service, 51% of the price of the service has to come from U.S. sources. So if you can advance the slide, please. Okay, so what is export promotion? Really, this is helping you to sell your products and services in a foreign market. So we can identify, screen, and qualify potential foreign business partners, things like agents, distributors, representatives, buyers, etc. We can provide information and business counsel on opportunities, conditions, regulations, and standards in foreign markets, or even U.S. export controls. We can advocate on behalf of your business in a competitive public tender abroad, specifically when the tender owner is a foreign government. It doesn't have to be the national government. It could be the provincial or cantonal government. It could be a local government. It could be a parastatal corporation. But if you are a bidder in a competitive public tender abroad, and it's in the U.S. national interest to conduct the advocacy, we can advocate on behalf of the U.S. bidder or the U.S. bid. What is commercial diplomacy? Commercial diplomacy is overcoming trade irritants, technical, tariff, and non-tariff barriers to trade. And then the final thing that we do is more of interest to economic development organizations, although it can be of interest to a company looking to get a supplier or business partner closer to them here in the United States. And that is to say that we attract greenfield investment into the United States in collaboration with our counterparts at the state level, like Enterprise Florida, that you'll hear about soon, and the regional and local levels. So if we can advance the slide, please. All right, so Jill was talking about partner identification and partner qualification. These are all fee-based services. So about a slide or two back, I talked about qualification criteria and said that it's both the company has to be organized under the laws of the United States, but also there are U.S. source rules. If they both apply, then what's on this slide is available to you. And that is to say that, the U.S. Embassy has to agree to provide service. And in situations where they're not sure if they can find you business, what we'll do is what's called an initial market check. It's research that we would normally do for a couple of the other slides, a couple of the other services on this slide, to either prove or disprove to ourselves and frankly to you that a market in fact does exist and that it is a good idea to proceed with a partner identification service. And I will describe them momentarily. But before I get off the initial market check, the cost of an initial market check for a small company is $350. We will credit you that cost toward one of these other services if it turns out that indeed a market exists. Now, what are the other services? A Gold Key service is a partner identification service where we, in consultation with you, identify, screen, and qualify potential business partners in a foreign market. We set meetings for you with up to 5 of them. You fly into market. we facilitate meetings for you with these potential business partners at their places of business, and then we debrief you on appropriate follow-up given what took place and given the local business culture. In this COVID environment, for the most part, the Gold Key service is not available. In many locations, there are travel restrictions, and in any case, it may be unsafe to do that. So the next thing on this slide is the international partner search. The international partner search is everything that a Gold Key is except that we don't set the meetings, we don't facilitate the meetings, and we don't debrief you afterward because there were no meetings. So we give you the information on up to 5 screened, qualified potential business partners for your own follow-up. So what are we doing in a COVID environment when you want those facilitated meetings? Well, we're doing an international partner search with virtual introduction. So this is very much like a Gold Key service, only instead of you flying into Xanadu and meeting at company A's location and then driving to company B's location and meeting them there and then driving to company C's location and so forth, we set up a succession of WebEx or MS Teams virtual meetings with these potential business partners. And that's why we limit this to up to 5. If we've done our jobs properly, there are very likely not going to be 5 companies that make the cut. In any case, depending where we are in the world, because of traffic, because of distance, we may not be able to see more than 5 companies in a single day. In cases where there actually are more than 5 that make the cut, we can add additional days of meetings at cost, and I will go over the costs in the next slide. Now, what of a company that you met on your own and you just want to know, are these people legit? Well, we can do research on foreign companies. We don't do research on foreign people, but foreign companies, we can absolutely document their form of business organization, their background and qualification of the principals, their financials, their banking relationships, their trade relationships, their business reputation, whether we have an issue with them, what it is, whether we recommend that you do business with them. If not, why not? That's called an international company profile. And the final of our fee-based services that I've highlighted on this slide is website globalization. And that is recommendations by us to optimize and localize your website in the target export market. So really, what is website optimization? It's making your website more efficient so that there aren't as many long delays. For example, when people go on your web page and they don't just leave as a result of the long delays. And it's also about making your website attractive, shall we say, to the consumer in that market, and that gets us into localization as well. Localization is not just about the language, it's about the culture. Case in point, the color purple is bad luck in Algeria. So if you want people to go to your website and or click on things on your website, I'm not saying that you can't be successful with a website that's colored purple, but you might want to consider a different color scheme. So if you can advance the slide. All right, so this is our fee schedule, and you'll notice that there are 3 columns here, small, medium, and large. A small company is a company that is considered a small company by the Small Business Administration based upon either annual revenue or employee count for their principal NAICS code. So if you are considered a small business by SBA, then you get the small business pricing here. A large company per our fee schedule is a company whose annual revenue is $1 billion or more. By default, if you're not a small company or a large company, you get the medium-sized company pricing. So what you can see here are some of the services we talked about. For example, the Gold Key service costs $950 for a small company. For a medium-sized company, it's $2,300, and for a large company, it's $3,400. You'll notice that there's another line underneath, plus $350 for second day. Remember I said that if we've done our jobs right, there very likely are not more than 5 companies. Well, assume that there were 4 companies, and we could really only see 3 of them because of traffic and travel conditions and whatnot in that market. We might say, hey, we can see the 4th company, it'll cost you an extra $350. That's what that line's for. You know, the initial market check I said was $350. If that was necessary, then we would credit you the $350 toward the Gold Key service or toward an international, company, international partner search. In many cases, that's not necessary. That's really only when the embassy says, I don't think we can find you business, and you're fairly insistent that you want a gold key service anyway. We might compromise and say, look, let's try an initial market check. You are going to get these slides, so rather than get hung up on this particular slide about dollar amounts, suffice it to say that you can see this here, and that's how you read this chart. Can you advance the slide, please? Now, this is what's free, and Jill wants the focus of this presentation to be on partner identification and partner qualification, and she asked me to give you an anecdotal example. So I will tell you what's free, and then I will give you an anecdotal example. But know this, I can't disclose what you tell me under a couple of draconian legal acts. And so even though the company in question has given authorization to disclose, I'm still going to give them a different name. I'm going to make up an industry sector for them. I'm going to refer to countries X and Y, and we aren't going to get into specifics about companies. So what's free? Business counseling. You want me to walk you through the process for export licensing? I can't tell you that a license is or isn't required, but I can teach you how to do that yourself. You know, business counseling is always free. The advocacy stuff we talked about, inherently governmental, it's free. Commercial diplomacy is the purpose for an embassy being there in the first place. That's paid for by the general tax dollar, yours, mine, and everybody else's. So that is free. And supporting greenfield investment into the United States is also free. Anything that provides a unique benefit to an identifiable person that is not inherently governmental work, that is what we charge for. And that's the things like identifying and screening and qualifying potential foreign business partners, or conducting promotional activities for a specific city as opposed to investment into the United States, generally speaking. So what is the anecdotal story? Well, I had a client, and we're going to call them the Acme Company after the Roadrunner, you know, Acme Company, that had a distributor in country X that used to go by Acme X, and they got rid of them for cause. And a couple of years later, they found out that Acme X was producing counterfeit product in violation of Acme's trademarks in countries X and Y. So I suggested to this company that they record their trademark registrations with country X's customs administration, because recordation basically blocks the import of infringing goods, but in country X it also blocks the export as well. And that's where this counterfeiter was manufacturing, is country X. So now they can't get product out of country X. So we've got them boxed in there. Then I worked with the IP attaché in Bangkok, Thailand, to have an administrative raid on the counterfeiter in country X. That's where the law enforcement authorities show up at their place of business, block the exit so nobody can get in or leave, do inspections of the equipment, of the product, of the company's records, and if it turns out you're right, they reimburse the bond that you had to post for this, and they make arrests and seize the equipment and the counterfeit goods. It's a very effective way of putting your counterfeiter out of business. Then we worked with the US Embassy in country X to identify, screen, and qualify potential business partners for this company. But we asked them to wait to sign the distribution agreement for a major trade show in that market, where the US ambassador held a press briefing explaining what we had done to their counterfeiter, with the not so veiled threat that if you don't want the US government to do this to you, it's probably best not to counterfeit Acme's products, and this is the only legitimate source of supply, and they signed their distribution agreement. So solved their problem. They got new distribution in that market, and really, you know, it's an exaggeration to say they didn't pay much of anything for it, but my services were free. The embassy's partner identification service was reimbursed by the state of Florida, and you'll hear about that momentarily, so I'm not going to scoop Mike. I believe that they were intending to exhibit at that trade show anyway. So that didn't end up costing them anything. And I'm not sure if the IP attaché was able to get the government of country X to do the administrative raid for the United States government as opposed to having to post bond. So I believe very strongly that this may not have cost them really anything but their time. And it solved the problem. So the collective we that are speaking today can actually come in and provide a whole suite of services. So if you can forward the slide, please. I believe that's the end of my presentation. This is how you reach me. We are still under mandatory telework orders. It's best to call me on my cell phone or email me. That's it.
Thank you, Ken. Ken, can you give an example of, you had talked about advocating on behalf of U.S. bidders in a competitive public tender abroad. Can you talk a little bit more about what that looks like?
Yeah, but I don't have permission from an individual company, so I'm going to make up a scenario. You know, we have these alliances, you know, like NATO, for example, and they have technical specs for interoperability, and so you know, it might be that you are interested in selling to NATO or to a NATO member state, but you've never done this before. You know, the collective, we, including, you know, Mike Cooney and I, but also Jill, can help you to understand how to qualify to receive bid documents. We can help you to understand the bid rules. My agency, especially if there's foreign competition for this bid, and there very likely is, can advocate on behalf of you as the U.S. bidder, or maybe you're in a bid consortium and therefore the U.S. bid, or even if it's your distributor and market and they're not a U.S. company, there may still be a U.S. national interest. This is probably the only exception to the rule about, you know, U.S. nationality of our client. But we can advocate on behalf of the bid. And if it turns out that the country Xanadu, imaginary country, is a member of NATO and they've awarded the contract to their national champion in violation of the bid rules, we actually do have different levers based upon treaty obligations that we can use to either challenge the award or even put an end to the award. And it's up to that government whether they want to reissue the RFP or just not even go forward with the procurement. But awarding it to their national champion just because may not be an option for them. And if you want us to go there, we absolutely can and will go there. And we've done that before. We put into procurements when it was based on funny business.
Awesome, amazing services. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate that. So now we're going to turn it over to Mike Cooney, who is going to talk about some of the services of Enterprise Florida and trade shows. Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Ken. It's always a pleasure sharing the virtual stage with such esteemed colleagues. I know after listening to your bio, mine, I feel a bit inadequate, but I always feel like at the bottom of my resume or bio, I should add a quote from one of my, or at least to paraphrase a quote from one of my favorite travelers, and that's Marco Polo, when he said, "I did not write half of what I did, for I knew you would not believe it." And at least that's what I'm sticking to, regardless whether anybody believes me or not. I again thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for all of those listening in today. I hope you found so far that it has been worthwhile, and I certainly hope you'll find the remainder of the presentation and the Q&A as well. As was already stated, I'm the Director of International Trade and Development. I share that title with a number of colleagues from around the state, which I'll talk more about later. In addition to the 10 counties, which stretch from Highlands County to Sumter County, actually, change that, Marion County. So from Highlands County to Marion County, and from Polk County to Volusia and Brevard County, that is the area that I represent in Central Florida. In addition, I am responsible for aviation, aerospace, and defense statewide. Advance the slide, please. I don't seem to have control. Thank you. Enterprise Florida is the state's economic development organization, as has already been stated. I'm sure many, if not all of you, are already familiar with Enterprise Florida and its general primary purpose. We do a number of functions, some of which people don't necessarily know about, and then those that many people do. The one that is we're best known for, in addition to trade, is the business development. That is to say, I have colleagues on the business development side of Enterprise Florida that help companies relocate and expand to Florida from other states and from around the world. And the other half of the organization responsible for economic development in the more traditional sense is the trade side. That's what I, along with other colleagues, work with companies to help them export more. Next slide. We have these major industry sectors that we support. These are the ones that have been identified as the most important and critical to the state's economic infrastructure. You can see there's quite a number of them. I have a colleague by the name of Mike Schiffauer who handles life sciences. I have a colleague who handles a variety of manufacturing concerns, including marine. Someone else that then also handles clean tech and so on. So you get an idea of exactly the industries that we are the most interested in supporting and bringing to the state of Florida. As you can appreciate, almost all of these have well-paying, steady jobs that help to, in many cases, offset our dependency on the tourism sector, albeit important, albeit critical to our economy. As they always say, you never want to put all of your eggs in one basket, and I think COVID has more than proven that. So as Jill said, she had asked that we cover something a bit more specific than the generalities that I'm used to covering, which is to say that I was thrilled. It gives me something to talk about besides the normal blah, blah, blah that you'll be hearing at the end of my presentation. So bear with me while we go through this, because it's exciting to be able to cover something a bit more unique or in detail than I normally would. As a result of the pandemic and the fact that people were not able to meet in person, there was a transition from in-person trade shows to virtual trade shows. And it happened quickly. As you all remember, lockdown started somewhere in the middle of March of last year. And by around, I would say, April, March, more like June, was really our very first virtual trade show. And that was with the country of Colombia and an organization called AmCham, which is the American Chamber of Commerce in Colombia. And that was the very first. Now, by coincidence, that was actually not exactly planned that way. They had been planning a virtual trade show for over a year. So it more or less, that opportunity fell into their lap, because otherwise it takes quite a long time to plan for these virtual trade shows. In some cases, probably almost as long, if not more, because of all the technical requirements necessary to make them work. So our very first one was done in June, and it was a virtual trade show in the sense that it actually was in a game-like environment. So it was possible to pick an avatar. It was possible to pick the opportunity that you wanted either your booth to look like. You could have videos. It was really immersive, and it was quite successful. And that was our very first one. Since then, and I can speak only to my experience, at least on the aviation side of things, there were 3 trade shows that should have been in person that went virtual. One was to have taken place in Norway. It was called Aerospace. It went virtual. Another trade show was to have been in Singapore called MRO Asia Pacific. It went virtual. And then there was MRO Americas, which typically takes place in the US. And there's also another show called MRO Europe, which takes place somewhere in Europe. In this case, it was to have taken place in Barcelona last October. Those two were merged and made virtual. In those cases, the companies that did participate, I believe there was 1 or 2 for Aero Engines, 3 for MRO Asia Pacific, and 16 for MRO Transatlantic. Most of those companies would have been going to the MRO Europe in Barcelona. Altogether, the numbers, and I'll show you those in a minute, it's really a mixed bag in terms of what you get out of it as far as results. The other thing is, for a virtual trade show, it's really important to prepare. As I often tell my clients, everyone knows how to buy a ticket, fly halfway around the world, check into a hotel, and show up to a trade show 3 or 4 or 5 days. It is a whole different story when you're sitting in your bathrobe trying to do this from your home in a virtual setting. And sometimes people don't give it the attention that it deserves because they think, oh, well, I'll just show up and maybe I'll see or speak to someone in this virtual environment. In reality, it requires just as much time and energy to prepare. Sure, you don't have to buy the ticket, you don't have to get on the plane and all the other stuff that goes with having to physically show up. But as far as companies and how well they did, it was almost directly proportional to how well they prepared. Did they reach out to potential clients in time? Did they set meetings? And so on. And then, as I've already said, it was really mixed bag. I mean, we've had as little as roughly 50,000 anticipated sales over a 2-year period to 5 million. So it really depends on how hard someone takes advantage or does prepare for these. Now, back in March of this year, Enterprise Florida held the first and only Florida International Trade Expo. And we had in the neighborhood of 140 to 150 Florida companies. They also created a virtual environment. It wasn't quite as rich and detailed as the one that they did in the country of Colombia, but it was still very good. And this is an image of what the hall looked like, and then, of course, what an individual company's booth looked like. Once again, it was mixed results. Some companies did very well and others did not. Now, I want to point out one of the reasons why the aviation shows do well is because they are very much a vertical market. Meaning, if you go to an MRO show, and by the way, that's maintenance, repair, and overhaul, if I haven't already stated that. If you go to an MRO show, you're going to be there with aviation-related companies. That's it. In the Florida International Trade Expo show, it was very horizontal. We had everything from vitamin companies to aircraft parts companies and repair companies. So it really ran the gambit. And again, because it was very vertical in nature, very horizontal in nature and much more flatter, it was, again, one of those situations where not all companies did as well as they may have liked, but all companies agreed that it was still worthwhile. It was a very good experience. It helped them to understand what it was like to set up and then be responsible for a virtual booth. So from that standpoint, everyone agreed that it was still worthwhile and that they would probably do it again, except for the fact that as time, we hope, continues, and we will get away from virtual shows with a few exceptions, and we'll get back to in-person shows. So when it comes to in-person shows, as I say, this is something that I'm sure many of you have attended, either here in the States or abroad. It's important to choose the right show. Once again, using the vertical versus the horizontal approach, going to shows that are very specific to your industry and that appear to have attendees that are in the market for your products and services. Usually this can be found by simply going on the show exhibitor's website and seeing what their typical mix of exhibitors and attendees are. And then it's important to get to know the show organizer, that is the person that you'll be dealing with directly, in order to commit to the booth. That could be said of the virtual show as well, but I can again speak to the in-person show mainly simply because of the fact that those are what I'm most familiar with. And in the case of at least 4 major shows around the world, where I'm responsible for what we call the Florida Pavilion, and in that case, I actually buy raw space from the show organizer. I have a stand builder who builds it to my spec, and then I sell the booth space to Florida companies essentially at cost or at very low cost, because we're the state organization for economic development. We're not in it to make money. our objective is to help companies export more, thereby making it more affordable for those companies, since there's so much additional cost involved beyond just the cost of the booth itself. So in situations like that, where there's a Florida Pavilion and I'm responsible for it, then you would be dealing with me. If, on the other hand, it's a show where we don't have a presence or I'm not promoting it, then you'll be dealing directly with a show organizer or a company like Coleman. There's many others, but they will put together what they call a USA Pavilion, and companies can go into those areas and have support from the show organizer or the company, in this case Coleman, or whether it's Enterprise Florida. And then what to ask for and what to expect. So it's really important to understand exactly what you're going to do there. Are you going to take materials with you? Are you going to simply send one person? Are you going to send 3 people? How are you going to have the people situated in the booth? Is the booth big enough for you? A lot of times companies will go with the smallest booth possible, which in my case is a 5 square meter booth, roughly 2 by 2. So you're looking at not a very big booth, as you can imagine. And when I say 2 by 2, I'm talking more like 2 meters by 2 meters, which is roughly 6 by 6. So you're looking at a very, very small footprint. Once again, you want to make sure, and then prepare. Just as I said earlier, you don't want to just show up and not be ready for whatever may come. Notoriously, trade shows always have at least the first day or the day of buildup, as they call it, where there's so much going on. The monitor doesn't work. Something didn't show up that was supposed to have arrived that you shipped before the show. You name it, it's almost guaranteed it can go wrong. Another reason why preparation in advance is so critical to it. And then know the deadlines. And I say this on a very personal note because invariably I work with companies. I have a wonderful stand builder. She's absolutely remarkable. We give people the deadlines. We tell people the deadlines. We tell people the deadlines 3 and 4 times, and they still miss the deadlines. So if you want to really be the person that your show organizer or the person responsible for your booth remembers and helps, I strongly recommend you remember the deadlines and you adhere to them and you do exactly what you're told and do it when you're told. Otherwise, it will make for a very difficult transition to the real live show. So here's an example of the Florida Pavilion at several shows that we were responsible for. One in the upper left-hand corner is the Farnborough Air Show. That is the Paris Air Show. Sorry, that's the Paris Air Show, and that was in 2019. Then the one to the right of that is the Dubai Air Show, and the one to the bottom of that is an MRO show. In this case, it was the MRO Europe in London. And then the one on the bottom to the left is the Singapore Air Show. So once again, we have a footprint. It can range anywhere from roughly 75 square meters in size to 200 square meters in size. We generally have a reception area or an area where the exhibitors can go and get refreshments, where they can have meetings with their clients, and it will be something that's going to be a bit different and unique, certainly as it relates to COVID. We really don't know what to expect. We do know that there will be, of course, a lot more protocols in place for companies to attend the shows. For example, the Singapore Air Show was last February of 2020. It was right at the beginning of the pandemic. No one still knew what we were in for and could never have ever imagined. It was at the beginning to the point where even the people I report to told me I didn't have to go if I didn't feel comfortable. And I said, no, I'm going. I have 10 companies that are going. I want to be there to support them. It was just at the beginning of the protocols, mainly for temperature checks, but that was about it. That show was a former shell of itself, meaning that the one 2 years prior was in fact quite large, as were all the other shows. Many of the large companies that would typically have attended that Singapore show did not even show up, meaning they simply didn't send staff, they didn't finish out the stand build, they didn't do any of that. They left tens of millions of dollars of stand build unoccupied. Our show went on, it was reasonably successful, but once again, it was nothing like it had been the 2 years prior. Next slide, please. So here's a quick overview. This just gives you the sense of scope and the number of companies that I would typically go to a show like this. So at the Paris Air Show in 2019, it was an in-person show. We had 10 Florida exhibitors. The actual sales, which are the sales that they make during the show, were at 2 million. That doesn't happen very often, but it does sometimes. And the anticipated sales over the following 24 months were estimated among those 10 exhibitors at 38 million. You can see the MRO, maintenance, repair, and overhaul in Europe, in London, 2019, there were 10 companies, 9,000 in sales, 31 million, 0.5 in sales over the following 24 months. Dubai was again 10 companies, and you can see. Just take a look though at how the difference between that and the MRO, the virtual show, that was the combination of the Americas and the Europe. We had 16 companies. There were 73,467, which is a bit of a strange number, the actual sales, and 17,080,000 in sales over the following 24 months. Not bad, but as you can see, compared to an in-person show with far fewer exhibitors, the numbers would have probably been much higher. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to transition to the discussion over exactly what it is that we offer companies that want to export more of their products and services. Already Jill has told you, as has Ken, exactly what their services are. We partner with them, as you can expect. There's also other organizations we partner with, namely XM Bank and SBA Export Financing. Those are all additional resources that we have available to companies. So for us to work with a company, us being Enterprise Florida, we ask that there be export experience. Now, it can be export experience by what I call default. Somebody finds you on the web, they're in another country, they order 10 of whatever you're selling, you're now exporting, but it's not a strategy. It's simply reactionary. And I'll talk more about that in a moment with the export marketing plan and how that becomes a strategy. The other part of being export ready is that you have money and capital for the long haul. It typically takes around 18 months, and that's a very rough estimate, but 18 months from when you first have a discussion with a potential buyer to when that buyer signs a contract. So you can't expect that exporting is going to save your business, and that exporting must have 100% management support. Without that, it won't work. Eligibility, the manufacturer or support one of the targeted industry sectors. Manufacturing is almost a done deal. If you're a manufacturer, in almost every case, you're eligible for one of our grants. Or if you support one of those sectors that I showed you earlier, you would also, such as the MRO, maintenance, repair, and overhaul companies, they run the gamut, everything from a parts warehouse for aviation to rebuilding an engine that goes on a 737. Because they support one of those major sectors, they too are eligible. In business at least 2 years, less than 500 employees worldwide, Florida registered corporation on sunbiz.org, and not a publicly traded company. International trade grants, I'll move through this pretty quickly. You'll receive this all, both the hard copy and a PDF, as well as the recording, so you can go back through this. I'll hit the highlights because I'm quickly running out of time. We've already talked about the trade shows. There's the in-person and the virtual versions. Those receive reimbursable grants, and I'd like to make that very clear. Our grants are reimbursable. Companies upfront the money, and then they receive the amount that they've been awarded after the event occurs. That's especially true for the trade shows and the business matchmaking. It's to a lesser extent for the others, but I'll talk about that more in just a moment. business matchmaking. Ken already talked about the Gold Key. That too is eligible for a reimbursable grant. And then there's the virtual business matchmaking. The U.S. Commercial Service has their version, and Enterprise Florida has its version. Website localization, export marketing plan, and registration certification. The trade sector trade show grant provides 75% up to $7,500 as a reimbursable grant, and that's toward the cost of the booth and the booth only. It does not cover the cost of getting people there, hotels, per diem, etc. It's just for the cost of the booth. So if a company is going to a trade show outside the US, they would then register for that trade show. They would show proof that they've either paid a deposit or they paid in full. Once that occurs, they will contact me or one of my colleagues, who will then send them an application to the registry, to the grant. The company will complete that. It's very simple. It's online. It'll take no more than 15 or 20 minutes if you've never done it before. Once the company has received confirmation that they've received the award, then they can proceed. They can attend the show, and after the show, they'll then submit what we call an export sales report, along with an invoice for the amount that they've been awarded, and they receive a check for that amount within approximately 2 weeks. Gold Key, as has already been described by Ken, the cost on that varies, and I know it was on his sheet, but I think for a small company, it's $950 for 3 to 5 pre-qualified meetings set up and ready to go when you arrive at the destination where you want those meetings to occur and where you want the business to occur. That too would be similar to, as I just described to you. You would apply for the grant after you paid the fee, and then receive word you receive the grant, and then proceed, and then following, you will receive that amount as a reimbursement. The virtual trade show programs, again, all of this, with the exception of the bottom one, came about because of COVID. So the virtual trade show, as I mentioned, we've had several of those. Companies can receive up to $2,500 toward the virtual trade show. The virtual business matchmaking, I said already that EFI has its version, and U.S. Commercial Service has its version. I'll get into that in a bit more detail, but that is a reimbursable grant of up to $2,500. And then there's the website localization. This is a phenomenal program for a company that wants 2 websites in 2 native languages of 2 new websites that they want to enter or to penetrate to sell more of their products and services. The cost is $12,000. Our grant covers $8,000. The company pays $4,000 for 2 websites in 2 native languages of 2 new markets that they want to penetrate. They can be an English-speaking market, or they can be certainly any other language in any part of the world, and it would be covered by the grant. It just cannot be in the US for obvious reasons. These are the offices we have around the world, and of course, the US Commercial Service has far more than we do because they have representation in every country in the world, or at least in close proximity, or in some cases, embassies that cover perhaps more than one region or country. Have in the neighborhood of 14. And through this program with the virtual business matchmaking, we allow companies to once again be able to set up these. Please advance the slide. Thank you. So the virtual business matchmaking, too much to go into here. I'll just quickly run through the countries. We have most of the EU covered. We have Mexico, Canada, Africa includes South Africa, Tanzania, and Kenya, a good chunk of Asia. Israel just came online, and Brazil is soon to follow. So what this allows is for a company that wants to set up 5 guaranteed virtual business matchmaking meetings, they go through a process of completing a questionnaire as they would for the Gold Key. That questionnaire is shared with the office where the meetings will be set up. If the office believes they can satisfy that requirement and set up those meetings, then it follows from there, and the meetings are eventually set up, they occur, and once again, it's a reimbursable grant. Export marketing plan, Jill covered this. I wish now I had more time to cover it. It is by far my favorite of all the grants. It is a phenomenal document. It's was said earlier, the cost is $5,000, the grant covers $4,500, and the cost to the company is $500. If you went out and paid for a consultant to do the same grant, it would easily cost $30,000. That's not an exaggeration. I have set in on countless numbers of these, as has Jill and certainly Ken, and I've never heard anyone say, gee, this isn't what I expected. Everyone is blown away by it. Next slide. International registration. The international registration grant covers 50% up to $10,000. If a company is required to have a registration or certification in order to do business in another country, that grant helps to cover it. Next slide. Again, I won't cover this. You'll see it since we're running out of time. Next slide. This is how the state's divided up among myself and my colleagues. I'm the contact in Central Florida. If you're in another area, then by all means, let me know and I'll put you in contact with that person. Slide. And the last slide, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Tremendous resources through Enterprise Florida. Also, thank you for sharing the information about trade shows, best practices, and what that virtual trade show looks like, and some best practices for companies that may participate in those. All wonderful information. Thank you, both Ken and Mike, for all of that. So as promised, I am going to share with you some additional resources. But before we jump into that, Christopher, I think we have a couple more questions to ask everybody. Can you put those up?
Yes, absolutely. So the first poll question that we have is, what are the top 2 most common first languages? The answer alternatives are English and Chinese. It is Spanish and English. It is Chinese and Spanish, and it is English and French. So go ahead and answer the question, and I will keep it open for a few more seconds. Okay, I will go ahead and close. And we see that 6% answered English and Chinese, 50% Spanish and English, 33% Chinese and Spanish, and 11% English and French. And the correct answer is Chinese and Spanish.
That's right. Although Chinese and Spanish are the most widely spoken native languages, so I think that was the key word in that question, English is the largest language in the world when considering native as well as non-native speakers. So there are actually approximately 4 times more people speak English as a second language than as a native one. So English is widely used in business, but it's not used by all. However, it should not be an impediment to doing business in that market if they don't speak English, because there are translation services widely available and used to support international transactions. So great question. And Christopher, I think we have one more for everybody.
Yes, that is correct. We have one more question, and the question is as follows. What is the nearest town to the North Pole? And the answer alternatives is Utqavik, Alaska, Tromsø, Norway, Alert, Canada, or Longyearbyen, Svalbard, Norway. So give that a couple of seconds and then I will close. About half people have voted. Couple of more seconds and I will go ahead and close the poll. And we had 24 people answered Alaska, 29 Tromsø, Norway, 12% Alert, Canada, and 35% Longyearbyen, Svalbard, Norway. And the correct answer is Longyearbyen, Svalbard in Norway.
Great. And I threw that in for my colleague Christopher, who is from Norway. So just wanted to share a little fun fact with everybody about Norway and their distance to the North Pole. So thank you, Christopher. Those were great.
Absolutely.
So again, just wanted to share some resources with everybody. As Mike had mentioned, the Florida SBDC offers our export marketing plan service to assist you in supporting your international expansion plans. We can't stress enough the importance of planning. You know, I like to say companies never plan to fail, but they fail to plan. So preparation, as Mike stressed as well, is important in the success of your international marketing efforts. And this plan is a comprehensive, customized export marketing plan that's really intended to be a roadmap identifying markets where we think you can be most successful. Mike shared with you the cost as well as the wonderful grant provided by Enterprise Florida to support that program. There are some requirements that are listed here. And again, really proud of this program and what it can do to support your international sales. But there are a number of resources, and I'm so grateful for the wonderful resources available to Florida businesses to support your international growth. You heard today from Enterprise Florida and U.S. Commercial Service. There are many more resources, and I couldn't fit them all on this page, but I did just want to highlight a few. For companies that are exporting, one of the concerns that they have is, you know, how do I know if I'm going to get paid? There are wonderful resources and programs offered by the U.S. Small Business Administration and Ex-Im Bank, providing export loans, working capital, as well as insurance to guarantee payment from foreign buyers. We have the District Export Council, which are volunteers, business professionals who provide mentorship and educational events to complement the services provided by U.S. Commercial Service and their export promotion efforts. We also have the Central Florida International Trade Office, which is a wonderful resource to connect Central Florida businesses to trade resources, both import as well as export resources. And there are many, many more. Again, Florida small businesses are blessed with a great ecosystem of organizations here to support your international growth. And I'm happy to connect you with any of those, as well as provide our no-cost one-on-one consulting services. So here's my contact information. Again, these slides are located in the handout section that you can download. And if you're interested in the export marketing plan, the link to apply there, or for our no-cost one-on-one consulting, the link is located there as well. You also have Ken and Mike's contact information in the presentation. So I do want to thank Ken and Mike for joining us today and sharing the plethora of resources available from both of their organizations and talking a bit about how some things have pivoted in our virtual world that we've all been living in over the last 14 months, and as well as TD Bank for sponsoring this webinar. So now, turning it over to Christopher, do we have any questions in the chat?
Yes, we do have a couple of questions. The first question seems to be directed for Mike. And the question is, do software developers or technology service providers typically attend these shows with the Florida Pavilion?
It really depends on the show. In those cases, I have a colleague who is responsible for IT, and she from time to time will attend an international show and will recruit companies to attend that show. And then in that case, of course, yes. I should also point out that even if Florida doesn't have a presence or it's a show we don't normally promote, it still is eligible in most cases for the grant. There's a few exceptions if, for example, the show is a tabletop and not a physical booth. Tabletop does not qualify. So yes, if there is a trade show that makes sense for a software development company or IT company, then they too would be eligible if they meet the rest of the criteria.
Okay, thank you. The next question that we have is, how do I identify trade shows that would be most beneficial for my company?
I'll take a stab at that one. probably it's fair to say I've had a few more experiences with that. Again, I can't stress it enough. You really, one, need to know your industry, which sounds kind of silly, but you'd be surprised how many people I talk to. I was speaking with a client the other day, and I suggested they Google countries that use a particular aircraft that they service through their MRO. And you would have thought I told them the Holy Grail. I was quite surprised. It almost took me aback because it seemed like such a simple thing to me, but it was like something they never thought of. They said, "Oh, that's a good idea. I think we will. We'll check into that and see which countries are using those aircraft." I thought, good. And then when you do, let me know. So one, of course, is know what your customer base is, who's buying whatever it is. And forgive me if this was said by someone earlier, it's always a great point when it's made, and perhaps Ken or Jill said this, and that is, think about how in the Southern Hemisphere and the Northern Hemisphere. So when it's summer here, it's winter down south, literally, but yet it's vice versa. So your summer related products that may do very well here may also do well in the summer hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere during their summer. So don't just look at your product per se, look at how your product is used in different locations, countries, climates, and so on.
Okay, thank you. We have another question for all. Are there resources for potential exporters to find service provider partners, e.g. freight forwarders and export customs, warehousing near ports, etc.?
Ken, did you want to take that one?
Well, I don't know that I have special insight necessarily. As the Department of Commerce, we can't give the appearance of preference or endorsement, so we don't make direct referrals. What I oftentimes recommend that people do to find customs house brokers or freight forwarders is to look at the National Forwarders and Customs Brokers Association of America, I think is the actual name of the association. But if you put those keywords in to a search engine, it should come up, and they have a directory of members. Same thing with attorneys. I often will refer people to the Florida Bar Association's website. They have a Find a Lawyer service where they've got different search terms, and then you can sort. If you wanted a little bit more of a customized referral, that's where I would send you to the District Export Council. This is a group of people appointed to the deck by the U.S. Secretary of Commerce. They come from the exporting public, and their role on the District Export Council is to help other companies to export, to amplify the business consulting services that our export assistance centers provide. So where I can't give you a direct referral, and I actually don't work with a customs house broker as an exporter, they can, and many of them do work with customs house brokers. So if you want the contact information for the District Export Council, that's certainly something that we can, either put in the chat or provide separately.
Right.
I would add that there's all. I'm sorry, I was just going to say there is one for Florida, specifically for Florida. That's Florida Export Brokers, and I'll look that up while you finish your comment, Jill.
Yes, and I just wanted to say, you're certainly welcome to contact the SBDC. We also can't recommend anyone, but we can provide referrals to several for you to consider. And the Central Florida International Trade Office also is a great resource to connect you to some of these resources that you might be seeking.
And the one for Florida is the Florida Customs Brokers and Forwarders Association. So you can certainly Google that, and that will give you resources there to contact.
Great. Well, I think we're closing in on our time, but I know there are still more questions in the chat that I'm sorry that we didn't get to, but you have all of our email addresses, so please don't hesitate to contact us. We're here to support you in your export efforts. So Christopher, can I turn it back over to you to close us out?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you, Jill. If anyone has any follow-up questions or would like to schedule a meeting with a consultant, please feel free to visit our website at sbdcorlando.com/consulting to schedule an appointment. Again, thank you all for attending. Please be on the lookout for that evaluation survey, and we hope to see you soon again. Thank you all.